Early voting is also underway in Illinois. The State Board of Elections says more than 600,000 people have cast ballots either in person or by mail. Joining us now, Republican candidate for Illinois' 14th Congressional District, Jim Oberweis. He's challenging incumbent Democrat Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. And we appreciate your coming on this morning. First of all, if you could share with me what you're hearing from constituents in the district that you would like to represent, how they are feeling about the handling of the coronavirus pandemic, and how is the district faring in the coronavirus pandemic right now?
Well, good morning. Yes, I've been actually out knocking on doors for about 2 months now. We're finding people certainly have some concern about the virus, but I think that most people think that this is something we have to suffer through together, that we're gradually working through, and hopefully we'll have a vaccine fairly soon. What's been very interesting to me as I have talked to people, and by the way, I'm wearing a mask and standing back 6 feet from the door when people come to the door, but it's very interesting. The first question I ask, of course, is, will you support me for U.S. Congress? And we're getting a very overwhelming yes to that for most people. But the second question I ask is, what do you think about the presidential race? And that's been very interesting because I get some very strong supporters who just would think he's the greatest president ever, but lots of other people who don't like the way the office is operated, don't like the personality of the president. And it seems that most people are either going to go out to vote for the president or against the president. Virtually nobody seems to like Joe Biden. Nobody's going out to vote for Joe Biden. It's either for Trump or against Trump, which is a little different than most presidential elections.
And so just picking up on your point that this is something we need to suffer through together on the coronavirus, I appreciate that you're practicing social distancing, wearing a mask. Clearly, you believe that that could help in prevention. How do you speak to voters about this, especially since there is some controversy and also confusion from the president himself about masks and about exactly how to handle this pandemic? How would you handle it, especially given the fact that you know how your voters are feeling about it and you know about the deaths that are happening in your district? Would you urge people to practice extremely strict social distancing, and what else?
Well, look, my oldest daughter is a nurse practitioner who's worked in emergency rooms now for 20 or 30 years. And she pays a lot of attention to the science on this issue, and I do tend to listen to what she has to say. I believe that after looking at some of the evidence that masks do provide some protection both for the wearer and for others in the room. If you're indoors and in close contact for a prolonged period of time with other people, I think it's certainly wise to wear a mask and helpful to everybody. However, realistically, when you're outdoors and you're 5 or 6 feet from people or you're moving around, it seems to me there is little need to wear a mask under those circumstances. So I guess maybe you'd consider that somewhere in the middle of the road. They have a place. I think that should be up to local authorities decide what is important. I don't think there should be a national mask program where everybody has to wear a mask when they walk out. I mean, to me, it's a joke when people are riding bicycles or jogging wearing a mask. That to me makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Mike Barnicle.
Mr. Oberweis, well, first of all, one quick question. What is the deal with, the mask? What do you have against masks?
I don't have anything against them, as I just said. When in close contact and indoors, I wear one. I don't think they do any good or have any necessity.
But you make fun of people who wear them. But you're making fun of people who wear them, and they wear them because they don't want to infect anyone else. Why make fun of them?
No, on the contrary, I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm just saying that I think it's unnecessary when you're out. I think it's strange that people would wear one when they're bicycling or jogging outdoors. It makes no sense. No need.
Okay. All right, if you were in the House of Representatives right now, would you vote for the $2.5 trillion package, the add-on for the CARES Act?
Look, I think if we're in the House, I think the House should be looking at how do we help those who are really in need? How do we protect businesses that have been hurt by this pandemic? How do we help those employees who are in need? But to use this pandemic as an excuse to throw in lots of unneeded, unrelated programs, as Nancy Pelosi wants to do, is just absolutely wrong.
Like what programs are unneeded and unrelated that are in that bill?
Well, look, I'm not going to sit here and go through a whole list of those, but I think you're well aware that Nancy Pelosi would like to use this as an excuse to pass some of her favorite legislation. Why don't we just do standalone things? Let's look at what is important, what is needed, and let's pass those. And I think the president has suggested that.
Let's go to Michael Steele. Michael?
Hey, Jim. Thank you for making the run. I appreciate you getting out there on the trail like that. How have you, in light of the questioning from my colleagues on coronavirus and what you would do in Congress, how do you see yourself going into this Congress with a Nancy Pelosi as Speaker? And potentially with Democrats controlling the Senate, with or without President Trump in the White House. How do you see yourself as a member of Congress? Do you find that it's more important for you to represent your district or represent the interest of, let's say, if President Trump is in the White House, the interest of the president? And how do voters respond to that? What's their expectation of you in light of coronavirus and all of the things that we're dealing with, particularly on matters of race? Is that an issue in your district that you, as a member of Congress, would willing to step into and have a conversation with your district about?
Well, look, I believe that, I've served in the Illinois Senate now for the last almost 8 years. I constantly try to remind my fellow colleagues, please vote yes on the bill if you think it's a good bill. Vote no if you think it's a bad bill, regardless of which party is sponsoring that bill. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen in the Illinois Senate. I'm sure it doesn't always happen in Congress either. But I will continue to always vote what I think is good in the interests of our country, good in the interests of our state, and good in the interests of our district. That's why I believe so strongly in term limits. When we have term-limited legislators, they tend to vote in ways that they believe are good for the country, state, and district. When you have career politicians, they tend to vote in ways that they believe are good for their own reelection. And you get very different legislation out of that. And to go further in your question, one of the big issues in our district has been this whole idea of protesting and demonstrating. My opponent has made the statement that looting and rioting is a beautiful form of protest. When you destroy other people's businesses, their jobs, their livelihoods, that's not a beautiful form of protest. Look, when any of us see something wrong, we have a right to demonstrate or protest against that peacefully. That's certainly what Martin Luther King did. And believe it or not, I've walked down the streets of Michigan Avenue in Chicago with Pastor Corey Brooks to demonstrate against the violence that was occurring in the city of Chicago. I think that's great, but we didn't destroy any businesses. We didn't break any windows. We didn't steal anything. We didn't throw Molotov cocktails at businesses. My opponent somehow thinks that's okay. That shouldn't be a Republican or a Democrat issue. We ought to all be saying, absolutely not. That should not be allowed to happen. We need to stop it.
Okay, I'm not sure that's exactly what she said, but we'll leave it there. Republican candidate for Illinois' 14th Congressional District, Jim Oberweis, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.